right, everybody, I'm live right here with my mother's headstone right here at Houston Memorial Garden. My mother was here and been making a resident here at Houston Memorial Garden since 1971, 49 years plus. And I'm so honored and so thankful to Houston Memorial Garden because this cemetery, I remember it when they first kind of opened up and started taking people from Houston, Texas. Because right now we're in Pearland where the cemetery is located. And Pearland was just a little small mom and pop little town. But now Pearland have grown up so big that it's a major city here in Texas. And right now, you know, you looking back, as we look back over here on my side, Cullen, where the cemetery is located, Cullen was just a two-lane highway coming through here, leaving Harris County and coming into Brazoria County and coming into Pearland. And now it's a four-way boulevard now. It looks like a highway now. And we're gonna show you how Cullen look, but right now it's all about, in the last 18 years after my mother was buried here, Houston Memorial Garden put up this big old nice monument you see in the back of me right now, right in front of my mother. Now tell me that ain't God. Man, and when the guy came to me and asked me about having my mother's body out here, and I thought about it, people, because my mother's from a little town called Patterson, Texas, which is outside of Brookshire. And a lot of my relatives would say, well, you need to bring Lillian out here. And I said, no, I need to keep my mother close to me. And this cemetery, and the guy came out here and told me there was a fairly brand new cemetery and he could put my mother right up in the front. I jumped on it. And one of the biggest things that I could do in the last 49 years when I bought my mother a headstone out here, because I keep this vase full of flowers. I don't let my mother flowers get all run down. No, I come out here at least every 3 months and visit my mother. Because my mother is still here in my heart. She might have left me physically, but mentally and my spirit is still in my heart. And the memories are priceless in my heart. And we're finna go and show you how big this cemetery have grown in the last 49 years. Nobody never heard of Memorial Garden in 1971. But now, everybody comes out here in the Memorial Garden. And we're gonna take a tour of this cemetery and show you how many people have left here in the last 49 years. To show you how many people have came out here to join my mother. Because when my mother and I came out here and I buried my mother out here, it wasn't but one grave site that I knew, and that was Julius Carter, the founder of the Forward Time, and he only been out here 5 months before my mother came out here. And you know, I'm so grateful, man, for Houston Memorial Garden, and God give him the praises, because it was him who brought that man to my house after my mother got killed in 1971. And brought him to my house. See, thing about death is that you got sudden death when you're here today and you're gone today. You ain't prepared to death. And my mother left here on a sudden death. Because that Monday night we was hugging and kissing, she was telling me how much she was loving me, and that next day, 24 hours later, I was trying to make preparations for her burial. And it was the man here at Houston Memorial Garden came to me, because this cemetery was fairly new in burying people from Houston. Boy, you know, I look across the street over there, man. That used to be a little, what they call a Zydeco club. And it used to be called French's. And I always wanted to go over there. Man, I come over here on Sundays, man, to visit my mother and bring her flowers, and they be jamming over there. When I tell you they be jamming with that Zydeco music. And just to show you how much this little town Pearland have grown, I used to have to go, if I'm not getting my mother flowers in Houston, I would have to go all the way down 518 to Highway 35. And some of you might not know about Highway 35. Highway 35 is Telephone Road to get my mother some flowers, because everything out here was nothing but woods. That's it. It was woods all the way down to 518 here, the Cullen to 518. Then when you go down 518, it was woods all the way down until you almost get to Highway 35, Telephone Road. But now you go down 518 just as busy as the Galleria today.
All right, everybody, we're going to Houston Memorial Garden Cemetery. Okay, this is how the cemetery looked in 1971 when my mother first came out here and I buried my mother out here. I'm going to show you the original part of this cemetery back in 1971 and show you how much this cemetery have grown since then. Okay, this was, you see, we're going in the entrance. Okay, this part was here. I'm gonna drive around and show you exactly how it went down. All of this part was here in the 70s. In fact, when my mother was out here, this was here. And right up in here was the end of it, right here. This was the end of the cemetery, right here. The rest of this back here was nothing but woods and bushes. And over here, this was the end. And right over here, on the other side here, was nothing but woods and bushes. And this is how the cemetery was looking. Everything you see here have been put here, and these graves have been here after 1971. Most of this stuff most of the graves up in here are really in the 70s and the 80s, early 80s. And right over here was the end. That bayou was the end. And as I told you right there, that monument was set up around about 1980. Now all of this was up in here. Now this right up in here was already here, and it was empty. Most of the people that's buried here are buried in the early 70s, should I say the late 70s. And this is where, and then right up here where the office was still there. But right up here at the office, where that little spot up there, that was where they was burying little babies and little children right up in here. And the office was still there. And as we go here, we'll turn here. And all of this was here in the 70s, in the early 80s. And then the cemetery started expanding in the early 80s. You might say in the late 70s, 75, 76, it was expanding. And when they expanded, this part was still woods. This was still here. And all this was woods. All this was nothing but woods. And as you can see, when they started using that over there was in the early 80s. And there you go. Now look at it. Look how many people have came out here and joined my mother. That was the end. This was the end. All of those graves over there was nothing but woods. All back up in there was nothing but woods. And when they started expanding here, it was in the mid-80s when they expanded over here. And Houston Memorial Garden bought this property out here. And that's when they started expanding in the early 80s. And by the 80s, they were getting so crowded. And they expanded all of this here in the late 80s. All this at one time was nothing but woods when my mother first came out here in 1971. And Houston Memorial Garden have really took on a name, because when my mother passed, nobody never heard of Houston Memorial Garden. Only cemetery they heard of out here was Paradise South. And the reason why they knew about Paradise South, now that eventually Houston Memorial Garden have occupied that space there, so eventually they're gonna start putting grave sites over there, because these people are checking out here every minute. And see, wasn't nobody being buried out here during the time. Everybody mostly in 3rd Ward was getting buried in Paradise North out there in Acres Home, or Paradise South that was out here on Old Chocolate Bayou Road. Now, as we go through Houston Memorial Garden, you know, first of all, I'd like to say thank every one of you for all the support y'all giving me on this history that I do. And a lady was telling me about the history of why don't I come out here and do something on Memorial Garden Cemetery and do something on Pearland. But as I told you before, we got to learn how to start paying people. Everything ain't free. You know, I'm not trying to make any money, and I'm not finna beg nobody to bring any money. No, begging that ain't my thing. I'm gonna let you know that now. So I'm not finna beg nobody. But what I will do, I'll go as far as my money will take me. And right now, I'm going with where my money gonna take me. Now, when people start trying to contribute to this Black history, then I can go out there and do other things. But until then, I'm gonna do as much as I can with the little money I got, which is my own personal money. Because ain't nobody giving me a one lousy penny to do this. But I know people enjoy it, and I know they want to see it. And I'm going to put my app down there one time. Cash, the $ 9420, BOO. And that's it. I'm not going to beg nobody to help me do this Black history. You know, so it is what it is. You know, God will make a way. God has been making a way for the last 10 years of me doing this history. But now right here is something new that they added on in the 80s. They bought this property over here on the other side of the house. Over here was where French's was. Remember I told you about French's? French's was over here where used to be French's was a Zydeco club. And that's what French's used to be, and I always wanted to go to French's and said one day I was gonna go, but I never got a chance to go. As we go to the new part of Houston Memorial Garden. They have ran out of room. That's for anytime they're having a funeral like they're having one over there now, they got to come over here. Because there ain't no room over on the other side. And most of the grave sites out here is in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And most of the people who bought a plot out here bought them in the early 90s. Should I say the late 90s and the 2000s. See, this is how much this cemetery has grown. But in case you want to know, they still got a lot of room to bury some more people out here. But it's coronavirus. Still got room. Okay, as we go here, see all this here eventually gonna be full of grave sites. As we ride around here. And as you can see, they're having a funeral over there now. This is where the people are being buried now. They don't have a plot and they want to be buried at Memorial Garden. They're going to have to come right on this side over here. And see, and you go a little bit further in, they've been closed in. See, over on the other side, over there is Paradise South. Man, never would have thought that would happen. As we go riding through here, Memorial Garden. All of these are in the 2000s. All of these are millenniums grave sites that you're looking at now. They even got another second office over here. Man, this place have grown in the last 49 years, man.